So I love learning about all the wordplay in the Hebrew Bible that usually gets lost in translation, particularly in the early books of the Torah, which provide explanations for the names of certain important characters, which then get played around with in their stories. In Genesis 17, God comes to a 99-year-old Abraham to tell him that he and his wife Sarah are finally going to get the son they were promised, and in response to this, quote, Abraham fell on his face and laughed, vayitzhak. Just pretend I totally nailed the guttural H there. And he said in his heart, will a child be born to him who is 100 years old? Will Sarah, who is 90 years old, give birth? Then in the next chapter, Sarah overhears the same news, and Sarah laughed, vatitak, within herself, saying, after I have grown old, will I have pleasure, my lord being old also? Hey, what'd you just say? Nothing. And then in chapter 21, exactly a year later, Sarah gives birth to a son just as promised, and Abraham called his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac, yitzhak, that same word meaning he laughs. And Sarah says, God has made me laugh. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age. So basically, Isaac's name is a reference to the laughably absurd age of his parents. And from here, the story continues to play around with that etymology. In the very next verse, they hold a feast to celebrate Isaac's weaning, and Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Hagar the Egyptian, who she had borne to Abraham, mocking, metzahek. Therefore she said to Abraham, cast out this servant and her son, for the son of this servant will not be heir with my son Isaac. That word translated here as mocking actually uses the same root consonants as Yitzhak. Some translations render it as Ishmael playing with Isaac, which would make for an even bigger overreaction on Sarah's part, but the fact that it's a pun on Isaac's name, I think is the key to understanding what's going on here. This is actually a really neat observation I found in Robert Alter's Torah commentary. The real issue is that Sarah's afraid of Abraham's other son taking Isaac's place, so of course she'll get especially triggered when she sees him Isaacing, and this is what finally gets him and his mom kicked out. The same pun shows up again in chapter 26 when a grown-up Isaac visits the city of Gerar. While he's there, he tells everyone that his wife Rebekah is actually his sister, but then, when he had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out at a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was caressing Rebekah his wife. The word for caressing here is actually metzahek again. Other translations render it differently, but the overall sense is that he's fooling around with his wife. Wink, wink. All that fooling around eventually produced twin sons, whose names the narrator also had some fun with. But before we get into that, a quick word from our returning sponsor, Angelarium. A couple years ago, I collabed with Peter Moorbacher, the artist behind Angelarium, for a video where I talked about the Book of Watchers. And it was so cool to dive into the lore he created, all of it inspired by real-world angelic mythology and brought to life with some of the sickest artwork I have ever seen. Seriously, look at this shit. The Book of Watchers and its companion, the Book of Emanations, are perfect if you love stories that take you down rabbit holes, learning about the characters and their backgrounds, and then digging into the IRL myths and traditions they were based on. For some reason, I imagine a lot of my viewers would be into that exact sort of thing. You can still buy the books on the Angelarium store along with a whole bunch of other items. And if you want to keep up with projects currently in development, you can join the Angelarium Patreon. There you'll get first looks at new artwork and also bi-monthly updates on the development of the Angelarium tabletop RPG. Oh yeah, they're making a 5e compatible RPG and it's cool as hell. In this reimagining of Angelarium's lore, we visit a world haunted by the gigantic corpses of angels felled in a great war. These patron angels act as foundations for great cities known as thrones. Though long dead, the power thrown off by the bodies of these dead angels has given rise to priestly orders who use angelic magic for their own ends. If all of this sounds up your alley, and I assume it does, you should check out angelarium.net with the link in the description. And while you're there, don't forget to use discount code JAKE for 20% off any order from the Angelarium store. Thanks for sponsoring this video, Angelarium. Anyway, in Genesis 25, Rebekah feels her unborn sons fighting inside of her, and she went to inquire of Yahweh. Yahweh said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples will be separated from your body. The one people will be stronger than the other people. The elder will serve the younger. These 2 nations the twins would father were respectively the Israelites and their southern adversaries, the Edomites, another Semitic group who spoke a nearly identical language. Edom, uses the same root as human, Adam, and also the color red, Edom. The latter association is what gets played on here. The first boy came out red all over, like a hairy, Sayar, garment. They named him Esau. Sayar, meaning hairy, is a pun son on Seir, the mountainous region where the Edomites lived. So basically this is like if there was a family called the Redfords from a town called Harrison, and based on that you imagine their pioneer ancestor as a red hairy guy. Top tier folk etymology, I love it. From what I can tell, scholars aren't 100% sure where his birth name Esau, Esav, came from, and apparently the writer of this story didn't know either because no explanation is given. After that, his brother came out, and his hand had hold on Esau's heel, Ba'akev. He was named Jacob, Yaakov. In all likelihood, Jacob's name originally meant something like Yah protects or Yah follows after, but in this story it's understood to reference him gripping his older brother's heel at birth, as if trying to wrestle his way out of the womb first. This turns out to be very subtle foreshadowing to the episode that immediately follows. Jacob's home making lentil stew when Esau barges in and says, "Please feed me some of that red stuff, ha'adom, ha'adom, for I am famished." Therefore, his name is called Edom, Edom. So now it's explained where his nickname, which his descendants would carry on, came from. Apparently he wasn't already Edom enough. Anyway, Jacob said, "First sell me your birthright." Esau said, "Behold, I am about to die. What good is the birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." He swore to him. He sold his birthright to Jacob. Later in chapter 27, Jacob also yoinks Esau's blessing from their father Isaac, this time through a crafty ruse. And Esau says, "Isn't he rightly named Yaakov? For he has supplanted me, Vayaakveni, these 2 times. He took away my birthright, see now he has taken away my blessing." So now Esau associates Jacob's name with a word meaning to supplant or usurp, in case the heel grabbing wasn't a clear enough analogy. Many years later, in chapter 32, Jacob is of course given a new name after wrestling with a guy who may or may not have been Yahweh himself, or even a pre-incarnate Jesus if you want. I'm not going to argue over it. He tells Jacob, "Your name will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, Yisrael, for you have fought with divine beings and with men and have prevailed." So Israel comes from a combination of Sarah, here taken to mean fights or struggles, and El meaning divine being. Alternatively, scholars have proposed El will rule or El prevails as its original meaning, but it's no surprise that the ancient Jews resonated with the idea of struggling with the divine. That's basically the running theme of the Hebrew Bible. Huh, neat. So could you actually clear up whether you're supposed to be God or an angel or some kind of patron? Nope. Okay, whatever. Okay, so now for my favorite punny name in the whole Torah, that of my favorite Torah character, Moses. In Exodus 2, the Pharaoh's daughter finds a Levite baby hidden away in the reeds of the Nile and rescues him. Then later, upon formally adopting the child, she named him Moses, Moshe, and said, "Because I drew him, Meshitihu, out of the water." So yet again, we have a character's name associated with a word root that foreshadows his future role. Moses was drawn out of the water, and later he'll be the one to draw the Israelites out of Egypt. Very clever. Also, if you're a discerning reader, you might be wondering why an Egyptian princess is speaking Hebrew. All signs point to this being another folk etymology. So then, what's the real origin? One compelling theory is that Moses' name doesn't actually come from Hebrew, but rather derives from Egyptian Messi, meaning to be born of. It's a common element in theophoric names like Ramesses, born of Ra, and Tutmos, born of Thoth. In Moses' case, it looks as if he originally had a name like that, but then later had the pagan deity element removed. Probably after, becoming the major prophet of a monotheistic religion. And this is what I find so neat. If his name really is Egyptian in origin, that lends credence to Moses having actually been a real person. But at the same time, the Torah's use of a folk etymology suggests that his life story evolved considerably before being written down. The Israelites either intentionally erased his original pagan-sounding name from the record, or simply forgot about it. Either way, this gave them the opportunity to come up with yet another banger pun, and that's what really matters. I hope you enjoyed all of them as much as I did. Oh, and don't forget to tell me how bad my Hebrew pronunciation is in the comments.